Welcome to the 2014 podcast, post-draft, the Outlaws podcast. This is the League of Ordinary Gentlemen. Joining me today is Ben, Brad, and Drew, all here live in the studio. We're going to do a team-by-team breakdown of post-draft. And Drew, just start off with you. What are your impressions of Big Ben's team?
Oh, man. Why would we even talk about Big Ben's team? What's the % chance that he hears 1 minute of this podcast?
Were you surprised at all that he didn't actually show up for the draft? His entire team was auto-drafted.
No, we were not surprised. We said about 30 minutes before that we would be surprised if Big Ben showed up for the draft. So really, we can get mad at Big Ben all we want, but I'm blaming all you guys. This guy should not have been.
I do kind of feel misled about having a proxy to draft for this team or a co-manager. That obviously did not happen. I don't really know why he asked me earlier today what time the draft was, because he obviously had no interest in that. Looking at his team at quarterback, he's got Nick Foles, and then at receiver, he's actually got a very deep wide receiving core. Demaryius Thomas and Wes Welker, Percy Harvin, and Deshaun Jackson are on the bench, and then his running backs are Bishop Sankey, Stephen Ridley, Reggie Bush, and not a whole lot else at tight end. He's got Vernon Davis. You think that's good enough to make the playoffs this year?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe under somebody that actually rotated the lineup week to week. Anything's possible in football. But, I mean, this is just going to be a bye-week matchup for most people this year. We know that. And honestly, we can probably stop mentioning Big Ben's name because I'm going to start a movement to have this team taken over by somebody real soon.
Yeah, we'll see if that potentially could happen.
But I'll tell you one name that's not going to be on the fucking list, and that's Eric Schimmer. Go fuck yourself. That's all.
All right, well, let's just go ahead and move on to the second team because there's a good chance he doesn't even listen to this. Second team on the list, let's go to Mitch Connor. Little Ben sitting here right next to me. Ben, how did you feel about your draft tonight?
I'm pretty confident. I like my team. I think it's, dare I say, I think it's a top half team in this year so far. I'm pretty happy with all my starters. My bench could definitely use some help. I don't feel good about my flex at all, but I'm pretty happy for Romo for $4. I think he's going to have a pretty big season. They're going to have to throw a ton because they're going to be behind in a bunch of games, or at least that's the word on the street. Pumped about Manziel for $3. Couldn't be happier.
Let's be honest. There's a good chance that Manziel is your full-time starter by week 4.
Absolutely. But yeah, like I said, I like my team. Yeah, I came away pretty happy.
Yeah, I do like your starting lineup a lot. You probably could use maybe one extra running back would be nice if you had a third one that you could trust a little bit more, but that's just kind of nitpicking. Obviously, Brandon Marshall, Julio Jones, starting receivers, and then Giovanni Bernard and DeMarco Murray. While neither may be considered like a top 5 running back, they're both very solid low-end number ones, I think. Drew, what do you think about this team? Because I know these are probably some names that you're not used to seeing. In particular, Giovanni Bernard. I guess the rest of them, they're your household names. But do you think this is a team that's going to be in the top half of the league?
Oh, I like Bernard. I've already sent Ben a trade for Bernard tonight. Not a good one, but probably the thing I was most struck by Ben tonight was this is a guy that rips on the Cowboys all the time, hates watching the Cowboys, and he's got DeMarco Murray. And then let's talk about the quarterback position. This guy drafted Tony Romo. And let Brady
This guy is going to be extremely frustrating for Ben when he watches him on TV and he's throwing picks at the end of the game when he's hoping to rack up those cheap points.
Yeah, but Ben hates the Cowboys. He drafted Romo and let Tom Brady slide for single digits.
I actually don't hate the Cowboys. I went from hating the Cowboys like 3 or 4 years ago to just not caring either way. I honestly don't care. Actually, at this point, I kind of root for the Cowboys a little bit.
They do kind of have some cool players. When they were on TV all the time, it was like Quincy Carter at quarterback. That's when I really didn't like the team.
Let's be
taking
honest.
Up all the airtime.
The only reason we hate the Cowboys is because we have to watch Dallas-Jacksonville when we could watch,
I mean, don't get me wrong. If it's a primetime game and I'm down 15 points and it's Romo versus Brady, I'm still going to be going for Brady.
Okay.
But Ben, let me ask you about Brandon Cooks. I think he was the guy that had a lot of hype this preseason. Probably a few different people in the league wanted him. How excited are you about Brandon Cooks?
I don't know. He's worth a flyer. He could be on the waiver wire in 2 weeks. He could, I don't know, be.
It's obviously not that excited.
Be a breakout player. I don't know. Although I don't exactly have the best record of cutting people 2 or 3 weeks into the season. Alshon Jeffrey last year, D'Angelo Williams a few years ago. Cut those guys after like week 3, and they both exploded. So I don't know.
It's not a typical little Ben team.
Week 3.
It's not a typical Lil Ben team because in the past years, if you looked at Lil Ben's team, literally every person on his bench was a backup running back. that he was hoping to
Very-
pan out.
very true.
This year he mixed in some wide receivers. Actually, drafted way more wide receivers than he probably ever has, including Steve Smith Sr. So that was definitely a change up compared to what we're used to.
I want to before we move on. I just want to throw in that I actually like Bradshaw for $2. I think he could have some pretty good upside there. I have no idea if he's healthy right now.
I did
If
too.
he is,
I was
think
kinda-
it'll be a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I was kind of in a roster crunch where I didn't really need the running back depth, but I do kind of like him just because I don't think Richardson's going to get it done.
I was gonna say, is it? Do we really like Bradshaw or do we just hate Trent Richardson?
We hate Trent
A
Richardson.
little bit of both for me, but Bradshaw's pretty good whenever he plays.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to Drew's team. He's sitting right next to me. I look at this team. It's the usual names, a typical Drew team. He had a lot of his players back from last year. Cam Newton at quarterback, Fitzy and Andre at receiver, and Jamal Charles back at running back. And once again, Drew decided to go big and be a big spender, so that's a changing of the guard for him on draft night. And he even spent big at tight end on Gronkowski. He's got Steven Jackson back on the team at the flex, and then some of the older guys like Fred Jackson, Reggie Wayne, some of those guys on the bench. So, Drew, how good do you feel about this team?
I could have felt a lot better. Really, it was a bummer because we were down in the scrub category and I had a max bid of 26, which is too much for that point in the draft. Which makes me wish that I should have gone for one of the top 3 QBs and not gotten Cam. Like the big.
You did bid on all the top quarterbacks.
I did.
Pretty
I wanted,
intensely.
I wanted when coming into the draft, I wanted to get one of the top 3 QBs or Jimmy Graham. That was one of my. I didn't do much preparation, but that was definitely one of my goals in my head, and I didn't do either, so I was a little disappointed with that.
Now, you told me yesterday, I believe, that you were not going to take Fitzgerald this year more than likely, but he was on the board. You took him. Was that just a bold-faced lie, or did you just get caught up in the moment?
I got caught up in the moment. I saw him out there, and nobody was bidding on him except for an auto bid from Big Ben at $16. And
Did any of us yelling at you in the background influence your bidding at all? To click that button, maybe?
I do love that man. I don't know. Arizona's got a pretty easy week 1 to week 10 schedule. They don't start playing Seattle and San Francisco until later in the season during what will be our fantasy playoffs, in which case I probably won't be needing them about that time because my season will be over. So hopefully I can get some good use out of Fitz early on.
Brad, since you haven't said a word yet on the podcast, what do you think about Cam Newton this year?
Gonna run all over Tampa Bay.
Do you like him for his fantasy value, or you think he's just going to beat up on Tampa?
I think he's gonna beat up on Tampa. He's gonna be pretty good this year fantasy wise, though.
I'm gonna keep liking Cam Newton until he has a year where he's not a top 5 QB. I realize he's not in the elite class, but he feels pretty safe to me. And at $20, I'll take that.
All right, moving on. Brad, you were extremely quiet early on in the draft. You were the last person to take a player, but you actually got some pretty big names at your running back spots. You got Arian Foster, Marshawn Lynch, and C.J. Spiller, and even Chris Johnson on the bench. At receiver, you got Benson Jackson and Edelman. It's not spectacular, but it's pretty solid. And then you got Brady hoping for the bounce back at quarterback this year, and your guy Jordan Cameron at tight end. So, how do you feel about the draft?
Really didn't want Arian Foster. I missed Doug Martin already.
Would you trade Foster for Martin straight up?
Yeah. In like a second, I wouldn't even think about it.
Interesting.
That might be something that Josh would do.
Didn't want Tom Brady, but for $8. Didn't want Foster, but for less than 40. Yeah, who did want Brady?
I like the Brady pick actually.
Okay.
Nobody else seemed enamored with the pick. I thought it was a good pick.
$8. It's Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Regardless, this guy had a bad year last year, and he still threw for 4,300 yards and 25 touchdowns.
Yeah, the touchdowns were down for him, but
If
you
I
got to
hadn't-
think that's
if
going
I
to
hadn't
improve with
drafted
Gronk.
him last year, I would have for sure bid for that price.
He
But I had him
still,
last year, so-
he only threw 11 picks.
and their
too,
team had.
so-
It's not good.
Brad, what's your confidence level on C.J. Spiller this year?
Oh, it's about the confidence level I have in Chris Johnson. It's not there. It's a toss-up.
All right, so
Either one of these
it sounds
guys
like they're
could-
available for trade.
Yeah, they're available. Well, I like Spiller better than I like Johnson because Johnson's splitting with like 2 other guys, Bilal Powell and
Chris Ivory.
Spiller's got to deal with Fred Jackson, but Fred Jackson's an old man, so hopefully the wheel falls off. And hopefully the coach is smart enough to give Spiller the carries. Receiver-wise, I like my receivers. I got 4 guys that caught over 1,000 yards last year, and I really like DeAndre Hopkins having a breakout year this year. Even though He did have 800 yards last year, hoping he gets in the end zone more than twice.
Right.
But
All right, well, let's move on to Nick's team. And this team, it's not anything like it was last year. Last year he had the three-headed monster at running back and had the best team in the league. That was pretty much everybody agreed on that after draft night. This year, it is kind of misleading because it's easy to overlook that tight end Jimmy Graham there when you just glance at the starting lineup. But at running back, it's kind of brutal. You got Frank Gore, Bernard Pierce, Ray Rice, and Darren Sproles are his running backs that he's going to be starting every week.
I mean, I don't know if I'd say brutal at running back. It's definitely not the best, but I think Gore is obviously still serviceable.
Do you think it's passable?
Yeah, and I think between Pierce and Rice, I think one of those guys will, whether Ray Rice comes back and runs away or Pierce starts out on fire, I think one of those guys will.
He's doing better than
have
some.
I don't know. Hopefully, have it well.
What do you think about Stafford? In my
I don't
opinion,
think it's terrible. I don't think it's that great, but I don't think it's like.
Yeah.
Terrible.
It wasn't as bad as I had last year, where I had Monte Ball as my number 2 and Bryce Brown as my number 3. He spent $24 on Stafford. That seemed really high to me.
It was high.
Sure. Was he the 4th highest paid quarterback? I guess he went higher than Cam, so probably so.
Yeah.
And let's see, T.Y. Hilton, he got him for single digits. I thought that was a pretty good buy. I like Alshon Jeffrey. I feel like that's a guy that Drew probably is staying away from this year. Is that safe to say?
I honestly,
I'm a big fan.
I don't think Nick's team. I mean, I think I don't think it could be as bad as he and then. Now Nick was more down on his team than anybody in the room. This is the most he's been down on a team I think since I've had a draft with him, and I guess. I guess I can see why, but if T.Y. Hilton pans out, which I think he has the potential to, and Alshon Jeffrey, if he's good again, Stafford can be good. So, if everybody plays to their potential, and like you said, Graham, I think this team could be a little bit better than what it initially looks like.
If I were him, I would maybe look to trade Graham for a number 1 back if he could make that happen. Right. This team would look a lot better to me if he gets rid of Graham for a top running back.
Looks like a 5-8 team to me.
A 5-8 team, yeah. I mean,
like I said, if everybody plays to their potential, it'll be a good team.
Would you rather have this roster or Big Ben's roster?
Kind of.
Oh, I don't. I gotta go back and.
Pretty close, or no clear answer off the top of your head.
Yeah, well, that says it all. If I don't know for sure off the top of my head. If Big Ben can auto draft something that's in the ballpark, that's a bad sign for me.
I think we should just refer to this as team number 12 from here on out because there's not a many teams. So
that's a good point. All right, let's move on to another team that decided not to draft his entire roster as well. He also happens to be a passer. I'm going to give Derek the benefit of the doubt here in that his connection was probably lost or something because he did come back at the end of the draft, and he normally is pretty solid to stay throughout the draft. But I look at this team, and the first thing that jumps off to the bat to me is that Aaron Dobson is at his wide receiver 2 spot. He's got Drew Brees, he's got Des Bryant, Matt Forte, Toby Gerhart, and a pretty thin bench personally. And he's got a lot of top-heavy players, but even his starting lineup is very thin at the flex spot.
I haven't looked at all the teams yet, but I think it's safe. I might go ahead and say that Derek has the worst flex player in the league at Donald.
I would think so, and probably tight end as well.
He has 6 players on this team that are combined or started in 5% of Yahoo leagues. So
I do want to say, Drew Brees is just obviously he's a beast. He can single-handedly carry you for weeks. So Brees and Bryant, they're going to produce week in week out. So if there's a plus, those guys, and obviously Forte is, he showed last year that he can have a pretty big year in that system.
I wish I had paid the extra dollar.
But like you said, Dobson as your number 2, as a starting receiver, period.
And not just Dobson at number 2. Who the fuck is the flex?
That's what I'm saying. Donald Brown.
This team has the weakest wide receiver 2, tight end, and flex in the league, hands down.
I think Gerhardt's just a wild card. He could have, he's getting the hype, he's going to get the carries allegedly, so he could have a good year, or it's just tough in that Jacksonville offense.
If I'm Derek, I'm definitely trying to trade for a more balanced lineup. I don't normally recommend going to trade the 1 for 2, but it might be a situation where Derek should do that.
I got to pull up Derek's team, his draft on the page, but I'm trying to figure out how this team. I don't see $200 on this page.
I don't know because like Ryan said, I know he got logged out, so I don't know if the computer. I think Gerhart was a computer pick.
Yeah,
I don't think he would have gone that high.
He spent 24 on Gerhart,
if he had
60 something on Brees.
Well, he's got Kaepernick and Brees, and he probably spent a few more bucks on Kaepernick than he wanted to. So that could be another one. All right, well, let's just go ahead and move on to the next team. This might Is this team right there with Big Ben and Nick, or better or worse?
Which one?
Derek's team.
Derek's?
I
Oh,
think it's worse than Nick's, but
Ben. I
a
think
little
Ben.
better than Ben's.
Same area?
I think Ben could be right. I think Derek. We had this conversation earlier. We said that every year we look at Derek's team and say, "Ooh, that's not really impressive," and then he's always in the playoffs every single year.
Yeah, I
One
look
thing
at
I
Derek's
gotta
team
say
almost
about
every
Derek,
draft, and I'm like, man, I just don't know if this team's going to be good. Every
Derek's
year it is.
teams are always annoying. Baseball right now, I'm playing him. I can't pull away from him at all. It's tight. I mean, he's just annoying to play.
All right, let's move on to Josh's team. Drew, you had a lot of harsh criticism for Josh this week. He probably has no idea about
I
that.
hate you,
Right.
But you were really ragging on him in some group texts
I
about
really like
his
this team.
lack of success last year. What do you think about his team?
It wasn't like
Yeah,
it
I don't
wasn't.
think Josh has any idea.
Yeah, how would he? Yeah, it's not lack of success; it's lack of effort. But I mean, you look at his 4 big nominations. I guess he had 5 players this year that were double digits, and 4 of them I like. Mike Evans at 11 was a little much, but
Pretty sure he did that just so I couldn't have Mike Evans.
I mean, AP at 68, he's certainly gone for more in years past. He's gone for 77, 73. And I to me, he was the number 1 player this year, so I thought that was a good price on him. And then Doug Martin, 36. You know,
Real pissed about that.
it's worth a shot. So, and then Roddy White, 21. I like
About right, maybe?
Yeah, that was about right. Maybe a buck over what I would have really liked him at, but.
I actually think that Roddy White could end up panning out to be a pretty good deal, honestly.
I-
I wouldn't be surprised if he
I
had
really
a pretty
actually
good
really
bounce back
like this
season.
team.
I do too. I
Because
think it's honestly, I think
I
it's one
like
of the
Matt
top half
Ryan.
teams.
Matt Ryan's a solid quarterback for sure. Doug Martin and Adrian Peterson's a really good starting two to work with. Julius Thomas, he's the tight end from Denver.
I'm obviously
he's
not
real
as
good.
not as high on Doug Martin as
And,
Josh is and Brad are, but I think this is definitely one
I
of the
mean,
better
you
teams.
could do a lot worse at receiver than Roddy
What do you guys
White
think
and
about Marcus
Colston.
Colston at his second receiver spot? I'm definitely worried about him this
Yeah,
year.
I wouldn't be thrilled with that, but I think at the end of the year he's still going to have probably
It'll be worse.
700-800 yards, 5-6 touchdowns. So
I was burned by
Yeah.
Marquise
You
Colston
could do
last
worse.
year.
You could do
You
way
could do
worse
worse,
than
yeah.
having Colston.
I mean,
And,
he's not a name that you get excited
11,
about anymore, but
yeah.
I don't think this is a bad team. by any means.
I do agree that 11 was steep for Mike Evans. I think it was at the point of the draft where he basically just had to throw money around because
And
he had
I
too
guess
much.
Josh
But I do
has
kind of
the
like his
thing.
upside.
I guess Josh just has a thing for Amendola. I feel like he has him every year.
Yeah, he had
I
him
got
last
real
year.
excited when he drafted Amendola. I had him on my headphones. He started when he got Amendola. So
And it sounds like Ryan's pretty interested in one of his quarterbacks as well.
I'll be
Potentially.
interested to see what Lamar
Josh
Miller does.
Super
I thought
interested
if
in
Lamar
Lamar
Miller,
Miller is the big toss up here. If he lives up to half of his hype that he's been getting the past 2 years, it'll be a game changer. But that's
Yeah.
the big question.
yeah, he's. I mean,
Miami.
look at his team. He's got about the right level of players at every position, except for you said Colston's not a great number 2, but I think Lamar Miller's a good example of the kind of player you want to have in your flex spot.
Yeah, but I really
you know.
like Mike Evans for 11. I mean, I always put 10 on him just to empty my bank out.
Are you
but
serious? I was just ragging on that pick.
I like Mike Evans.
All right.
I would have spent 10 on him
He's a
just to
Bucs
empty
player.
out my thing. I wouldn't
Yeah.
actually have spent 10 on him if I needed
It's
somebody else. I like Tavon Austin too. So
very rare a rookie receiver comes into the league and makes an impact.
Let's go ahead and move on
Him
to
and
Caleb's team.
Djax.
Caleb, always subject of a lot of criticism. This year, he did go cheap at running back, not anything like he did last year. But it is a similarly built team. He's always a guy that goes after a top quarterback, and he did that. And he's got 2, I guess borderline top 12 or so receivers: AJ Green and Randall Cobb. Rashad Jennings, I thought was a good buy. I think he went for $15.
That's correct.
MJD, I'm not too crazy about him, but he's also got Woodhead to back him up. Jeremy Hill, decent guys if you have to throw somebody in there. Victor Cruz at flex. Ben, you were particularly high on Cruz.
Yeah, I actually think Cruz was I think you got him for like $21. I think I really like that deal. I think Cruz could have a pretty big year. So I like Cruz a lot better than Randall Cobb, but that's just me. We know I don't really like Randall Cobb too much, but Peyton Manning, obviously, stud quarterback. I don't feel too safe about any of his running backs. I'm not as high on Jennings as some other people maybe, but
I like Jennings, but I am worried about him not getting goal line carries potentially. That changes everything for me.
I do want to say I'm a little shocked that Caleb didn't come away with either Graham or Calvin Johnson. I thought for sure he was going to try to go after one of those guys again.
Right.
The difference between this year and last year is you don't look at the end of a matchup. You're not going to look at Heavy C's team and go, he got 2 points combined from his running backs and got all his points from the receivers and quarterback. It's a little more well-rounded than it was, but still not.
But that Oakland situation, I don't know what to make of that. So
what was it? Last year he took the top
Raiders
quarterback,
quarterback.
the number 1 and number 2 wide receivers in Calvin and
is AJ Green number 2?
and AJ Green.
Yeah, he was.
AJ Green was preseason number 2
Oh,
last year.
preseason.
And then do you know who he had as flex last year? It's just where I'm trying to compare.
He had Hakeem Nicks.
Hakeem Nicks. Okay.
I mean,
So-
like Ryan said, it's a similarly built team. I don't think he has necessarily the top names that he did last year, but it's definitely similar.
He's a little
Similar
better off at
style.
running back this
So
year
how do
than
y'all
he was
compare it
last
to
year.
last year's team? Do you
Well, honestly,
team?
last year I thought his team was horrible, but I was dead wrong on that. I like it coming out of the draft compared to where he was last year. I like it a little bit better. I like his flex better than what he had last year, and his running backs better. But obviously, he doesn't have Calvin Johnson or Jimmy Graham. So,
Hmm.
what do you think?
I don't know. I mean,
Where do you
yeah.
kind of see him right now in the league? Middle of the pack? That's kind of what I would think.
It depends on effort. I mean, there's been there back in the day when I was a more sketchier fantasy player. There were definitely a couple Sundays where I had to call Heavy C and be like, "Hey, this guy's on bye, and all your guys games start in about 15 minutes." So, I didn't do that last year, but I'm just hoping
Yeah.
he keeps up the effort.
Now,
throughout
one
the
thing that we
season.
should point out here: Heavy C is the Yahoo projected number 1 team in the power rankings.
Yeah, well,
So-
remember the year I put him number 1 in my own personal power
Yes, I do.
rankings?
I want to say that Caleb does have top defense, which normally it's like who cares the defense, but I think Seattle's about as safe as you can get in terms of a defense.
Right.
I mean, they're going to be one of the top 3 defenses at the year's end, if not number 1. So
Yeah, they do have Green Bay week 1. I'm just saying.
All right, let's move on to Brandon S.'s team. Brandon really held out for a quarterback there. I thought when RG3 got nominated that might be a fight between us two. And then I thought maybe he was holding out for Cutler. He didn't play so good on Cutler. He waited all the way to Rivers, and he spent like $6 on him, which is more than what RG3 went for, more than what Romo went for. What do you think about him putting all of his eggs in the basket for Rivers?
32-11.
Are you that confident in him? I maybe for $1, I still would want somebody else there. He's got Andy Dalton,
I mean,
but I was kind of joking around about Dalton. I don't really like him.
This
They
team,
both had more touchdowns than Tom Brady.
this is a clear-cut bottom 6 team.
You think so?
Yeah.
What about his running backs? I think there's worse running back situations. It's not great, but it's solid. He's got Lacey, Ryan Matthews, and Ben Tate. You obviously don't sound too high on Ben Tate.
Yeah, well, I mean, Terrence Williams is the second best receiver.
I kind of like Williams, but he's definitely not a sure thing.
Okay, fine. Terrence Williams goes on by. Who's starting next to him? I mean,
Yeah, now he does have Kelvin Benjamin down here on the bench. Who's been getting
I like his bench receivers in terms of upside with Jordan Matthews and Hunter and Benjamin. They're lesser known names for sure.
This is another thing another team where I think it depends. If Kelvin Benjamin ends up being serviceable, that could be a big difference. Carlos Hyde, if Gore goes down in one of these seasons, he's got to go down. Hyde's getting quite a bit of hype, so I don't know.
I'm just not impressed.
What about I do kind of like Zach Ertz. He took a bunch of guys that are high upside,
I
but
agree with you. I mean, after
yeah.
Keenan Allen, there's just nobody there wide
They're
receiver.
swinging for the fences.
Yeah, so he's got a bunch of guys that have a lot of preseason hype around them, but they're a lot of unsure commodities.
But I do like Lacey, and I'm a little bit higher on Matthews than I think a lot of other people are. I actually don't mind him as the. I mean, I look at Matthews as the number 2 on this team rather than the flex. And
I do too.
Well, yeah, of course.
So.
I don't like Ryan Matthews at all.
Any chance Moreno has substantial value this year?
I wouldn't be.
There's a chance.
Obviously not as good as last year, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was flex
Flex
worthy
worthy.
for sure.
All right,
I
well,
didn't think he was even flex worthy last year.
I do really like Keenan Allen though. He's awesome.
let's move on to Michael's team. Got to be honest, I felt a little bad about my my internet connection here when he got screwed over, taking $11 on Kendall Wright, who I believe is going to be a bench player for him. So sorry about that, Michael.
Well, that's what happens when you're a cheap bastard and have that much money left over late in the draft.
Yeah, he definitely is. He pulled his old cheapskate spiel, and I love Andrew Luck this year at quarterback. I know that that is probably surprising. But I think he's going to have a really big year. I mean, they cannot run the football. They can't be so stubborn as they were last year to give so many carries to Richardson. The way they got to win is just air it out, and Luck could have a big season if they decide to go that route. He's got two great receivers in Jordy Nelson and Antonio Brown. Two pretty solid running backs. I'd say, similar to Little Ben, but not quite as good as his, but in that same kind of maybe a slight tier down from in Le'Veon Bell and Andre Ellington. Bench guys, nothing too impressive, but Joey Bell, he could be usable at times this year.
Somebody owns Sean Green. It's pretty shocking to me.
Yeah. Sean Green, I feel like he should be drafted, but I can't think of a scenario where I'd ever feel comfortable starting Sean Green.
I do think that he has. I mean, I still don't have all the teams memorized, but I think he has one of the best wide receiver combos in the league for sure with Nelson and Antonio Brown. I'm actually pretty high on both those receivers this year. I mean, I think they're for sure probably going to be top 10 wide receivers. Yeah.
It's weird. I kind of like his team, but at the same time, there's two guys on his team that if they walked up to me on the street, I would know who they were. That's Luck and Jordy Nelson. And I have no idea what anybody else.
The Levy and Bell scares me a little because it's
that's a good point.
As each day passes, it sounds like Blunt's going to get more and more work with him in there.
And they're saying that Blunt's going to get the short yardage goal line work potentially.
Honestly, I'm not really high on Ellington at all. So I do worry about the running.
Really, that surprises me. I thought you'd be all over Ellington.
Ellington is freaking sweet.
The guys like Doug Martin,
but I actually. If I was Mike, I'd probably feel more comfortable starting Joey Bell over Golden Tate in the flex.
Yeah, I could see that too.
But I do like Andrew Luck, not as much as you do this year, Ryan. But I think he'll be a pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, so I think we all like his starting lineup pretty well, but we have some concerns about Le'Veon Bell, and you sound like you have concerns about Ellington.
Ellington, I think, is a big question mark for me.
Why?
I just feel. I mean, I've read stuff that they don't want to pound him into the ground, and I don't know. I feel like he's not breaking the big play. He's not doing much. But what the hell do I know? So
I don't think he needs that many touches. I think he's kind of like Jamal Charles.
Plus, Arizona just kind of their offense. I don't know. They just kind of scare me.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to Blake's team. Bombay's Triple D, great team name, and I love the picture of Emilio Estevez. He's got that backwards hat, and I feel like I've seen occasionally Blake wear his hat backwards, and it always kind of seems to be in this exact same style. It's very unique, where the front of the bill is at, like the top of the hairline, and it's very much slanted down, which is it gives him some style there. Anyway, let's move on. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers, Calvin Johnson at receiver, Michael Crabtree. I was kind of bidding back and forth with Blake on Crabtree because I needed a receiver, and they're saying that they're going to throw the ball a little bit more in San Francisco this year, and saying he looks a lot better than he did last year, a lot healthier. Running back is the concern here. Alfred Morris after him. It's Trent Richardson. Anybody else that he even could potentially start in that spot? I mean, he's got Starks, Ingram, and Green Ellis. That is a huge weakness.
Blake's second running back scares the shit out of me, honestly. Like, besides Morris, there's nobody.
Yeah.
So he's got to do something. Like, I would be making. I don't know.
That might be a team. Since I've got three backs, I might be making a run after Megatron. We'll see here.
Like I have Spiller and Chris Johnson. Just saying.
But as you pointed out, Rodgers and Calvin.
That's what happens when you pay for a top receiver like that, or with Nick paid for Jimmy Graham, you got a huge weakness somewhere else in the starting lineup.
Crabtree too. If he. I like him. I think he could be pretty good this year.
What about Pierre Garçon? That on the surface, that looks like a really good flex based on what he did last year. Mm-hmm. But Deshaun Jackson's coming over there. I'm worried about that in terms of his targets going forward.
I think Pierre Garçon is more of a second.
Really, the only thing that I don't really like for Blake's starting roster is that second running back. Everything else, I'm a little.
You're okay with?
I'm okay.
What is your? I know it can't be high, but Drew, do you know how much Trent Richardson went for?
14, I think. Maybe?
Is there any chance? What is the chance that he is going to be worth that $14?
He went for double digits.
I'll have to check. He definitely went for double digits.
See, that must have been where Blake just didn't have a running back.
He
so
didn't.
He had to.
Yeah, actually, I was bidding back and forth with Blake, and I knew once it became clear to me at one point that he was going to keep going until he got him because his running back situation was so desperate. So I pushed him up a little bit, and he ended up taking him for. Oh, not as much as I thought. $9.
Okay.
And you never know. Apparently, Jeremy Hill got hurt tonight, so I don't know how it's serious. But if that's hurt, then that could be big news for Green Ellis. He may sneak in there and get a little bit of work. So.
I mean, we've seen it in the past. I mean, he's got the job, but if he's only going to average 2.9 yards a carry, I mean we saw that guy last year. He sucks.
Oh, Green Ellis?
No, but
Richardson? Yeah.
Trent Richardson.
Oh, yeah. He's terrible.
So I just
in there for less than 3 yards.
Well, I mean, Blake's going to have to rely on Calvin and Aaron to carry him, which they definitely can do.
I mean, heck, it worked for Heavy C last year.
Oh, yeah. And I like Morris quite a bit this year, too.
This is similar to the team he had last year in the sense that he has like one major weak spot in his starting lineup, and then his bench is absolutely horrible. That's what I'm looking for from Blake this year, is to improve the bench, because last year it was brutal, and that really caught him in the bye weeks.
He also has Starks, so, if Eddie Lacy goes down.
And he was one of the worst teams to ever make the playoffs last year. I'll just throw that out there.
It's a little harsh.
Why did you feel that needed to be said?
Feel, buddy.
I'm just
Didn't you make the playoffs 2 years and bottom 3 team in total in points?
No, wow.
Yeah,
I think that's yes.
It was close.
Yes, it's true.
It was close.
Didn't he get in worse last 2 points?
No.
Definitely bottom 3.
No, but Blake had a rough year points wise last
You
year.
hear that, Booters? You're being disrespected.
Blake was like 9th or 10th or 11th in points last year. So, anyways, all right.
You know what? I think the only team left is mine. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll just go ahead and move on to my team, Mr. Wonderful.
Worst team in the league.
So, I was a little upset when I saw the projections come out that I was 6th. I thought that I had a better draft than that. So, that was a little disappointing. I'll just let somebody else start talking about my team.
Here, I'll do
I'm a
it.
huge fan of your running back situation. Stacy, McCoy, and Ball.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the best running back combo
I'm
in
not
the
going to
league.
lie.
for sure.
One on your bench doesn't hurt because you might at least get the goal line carry. So if anything for a bye week or last-second flex play to maybe vulture a touchdown, you could do a lot worse.
Obviously, you got running backs. Obviously that's no concern. Tight end, I think between Reed or Rudolph, one of those will probably pan out. So I'm not really worried about the tight end. Quarterback has me. I'd be really scared. I would for sure try to get some type of trade.
Yeah, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of RG3's got a high ceiling.
Wide receiver, I'm actually not really big on Patterson like some people are, but I think between Torrey Smith and Floyd, they'll probably be decent.
I really like Floyd. In fact,
So the wide receiver is kind of a question mark, but I don't think they're terrible.
Yeah.
Basically, my only concern for you would be quarterback.
I would have liked to get one safer top receiver to pair with one of these other guys that are a little bit high upside that you're not really sure what you're going to get until they play. So I might be looking to trade a running back for a top receiver if anybody's interested.
No, well, I'll just reiterate what they said. By far the best running back situation in the league. And just me personally, if I had this kind of running back situation, it's such a relief because you got 3 studs there. Three
One of the annoying things about it is that 2 of the running backs have the same bye week.
That is annoying for sure. But I just wanted to say I did like the Macklin pick for $2. I've always kind of liked Macklin. I was surprised to see you draft Marquise Lee.
He's my last pick.
I didn't know who he was.
Mostly because I don't know who he is. But
You see Jacksonville by his name.
yeah, Jacksonville.
Well, I'm hoping that he's the number 1 option this year. They're talking down Shorts, and Blackman's obviously not expected to play this year.
Right.
So now,
But with your running back situation, you could do a lot worse than Torrey Smith, Cordero Patterson, Michael Floyd, and Jeremy Macklin.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Choices of wide receiver.
I agree with the 3 running backs you have. Yeah, it's almost kind of surprising
I
that you have.
had good running backs last year, and my receivers were not even.
Because like you said, obviously none of those receivers are number 1, but it looks like you
Yeah,
have.
well, that's kind of what I was going for. There's a bunch of guys. I don't feel great about any of those guys starting, but I hope that drafting 4 of them, I can figure that out as the season goes along.
Floyd and Patterson last year, so.
Now, before we finish up,
I do like Michael Floyd too.
I know that you
Big fan.
said you didn't want Ball again, and you drafted him last year and were hurt pretty bad. Were you planning on drafting Ball this year, or did it just kind of end up on your team?
He just kind of ended up on my team. I thought I would maybe, honestly, I thought he would go for a little bit more than he did. He went for 49. The running back prices were a lot cheaper this year than in the last couple of seasons. So,
It's not as big because running backs are splitting
I was coming into the draft expecting to pay $71 for either McCoy or AP. So I was happy at the price I got McCoy, and I thought that saved me a little bit of money in getting another running back.
I mean, can you? I mean,
And then when
I
Zach
think you can
Stacy,
count the running backs on one hand that actually have a full-time job to themselves and they get all the carries.
the only decision I really made throughout the draft that I'm questioning is I had Zach Stacy or Julio Jones as kind of my last big target left on the board. I decided to go with that last running back over Julio, and I'm still not sure if that's what I wanted to do or not. Me and Ben might be looking to trade. We don't. It's being talked about.
I
I'll
would
trade
take,
for Zach Stacy.
I would have taken Stacy over Julio. I'd
Yeah.
take the running back. I like Julio though.
I don't know what it is about Julio.
I would have liked to have a receiver near that caliber that I can trust to stay healthy a little bit better.
No end. Like,
Yeah, but when it comes down to the elite, the big name running backs are
Hard to
I don't
find.
know. It wasn't true last year. There were a lot of
Zach
letdowns
Stacy is
last
on
year.
the list of elite running backs.
Anybody have any thoughts on James White? Am I alone on that one?
I think you're alone on that
Who's
one.
James White?
It's tough to trust those Patriots running backs.
They're saying that he could be the backup for the passing role or the in between the tackles role for Ridley and Doreen. So if one of those goes down, he could have a substantial role with the team.
They're the only team that somebody will start and have 100 yards and a TD, and the very next week they'll be perfectly healthy, and a separate running back will have 2 TDs and 80 yards or something like that.
Mhm.
They just play running back carousel.
So White is basically their replacement for Danny Woodhead.
Well, Woodhead was
Come in
there
and
last
catch the
year.
ball.
Right. Any other thoughts from draft night?
I like
I
my
just
team.
thank everybody for coming out. A little bit more tame than years past.
Definitely the most
But,
subdued draft night.
Still
Yeah.
Me and Brad
enjoyable.
are going to play for the championship.
What?
Bold prediction.
Anything
Me
else?
versus Ryan in the finals.
I don't know. I mean, who is one person we would say is a definite lock to make the playoffs, and one person who is definitely a lock to miss the playoffs?
Big Ben is a definite
All
lock
right,
to miss the playoffs.
let's
Other than Big
Team 12, you
Ben,
mean?
Besides Big Ben.
Derek.
I'm gonna pick Little Ben.
To miss the playoffs?
No, to make the playoffs.
I was about to say, have some respect.
I think Ron's a lock to make it because that running back situation.
Yeah, that's tough to.
Big
tough to
surprise,
screw
you
up.
sucking up to Ryan.
I'm suck up to Ryan. I'm looking
You
at
suck
Josh
up to
Ryan.
him in trades.
Look for a big
You suck
trade to
up
go
to
down
him.
tonight too between Brad and
Ryan,
Ryan.
come on,
Yeah.
we gotta make a trade so everybody can complain about it
Yeah.
tomorrow
Look for
morning.
Ryan to get Brad's
Sure.
best player. By
I'm
tomorrow
okay with doing that.
No kidding.
Come on, let's make a trade on Zach Stacy.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I want Giancarlo Stanton for him.
Okay, deal. Deal.
Do you want to talk about baseball for just a minute before we get out?
What do you? I mean, if you have something quick to say.
I'm making the playoffs, but Ben's not making the
Nothing.
playoffs. Sorry, Ben.
I still hate Eric Shim.
Well, he's not even. This is when he puts it on the football message
He's not
board.
going to be listening to this.
I don't know.
Why
I just thought it was-
Why
I
do
just-
you hate him so much?
I just
Why
thought it
do
was
you hate
interesting. It was football draft night. We didn't say a damn word about football. It was all about baseball. All these trade talks. I don't know. I think everyone's still kind of in baseball mode. Am I wrong?
I'm definitely in football mode.
I did a lot of research in terms of the
Good.
player news, but in terms of actual draft preparations or a set strategy coming in, I did not have one whatsoever. Which I probably would have if we had the draft a week or two later.
I'm going to be honest. I did not look at one magazine, one article, and I did about 10 minutes of a mock draft, and that is the only preparation I did for this draft.
And how do you feel you did?
Actually, I did the same thing for baseball this year and the same thing for football last year, and all 3 times I've liked my team better than any of the years where I did like
Yeah.
10, 15 mock drafts, listened to the radio for hours on end, read articles, bought magazines.
It's so
I
tough
like my
to.
team's better.
Did
I
you
mean,
pay
it's just
82 for Ray Rice? Is that right? Or was it 78?
I think it was like 77, 78.
76.
Me and Brad were going back at it.
Was that the highest
Doug
we've
Martin this
had?
year?
I think it's the highest we've ever seen.
Yeah,
Ray
Doug
Rice
Martin.
was a disappointment that year too. I was real upset about it.
It's just tough to. It's
That
always
was
tough to
that was
gauge.
one of the years I did all the
Gauge the
research,
teams right
and Ray
after the,
Rice is my boy.
I'll tell you one thing I've learned. Brad is not afraid to talk while somebody else is talking. I will just throw that out
Well,
there.
if you ever
Brad doesn't talk at all during the draft though. He puts on those headphones and goes away.
If you ever shut the hell up, nobody would interrupt you.
Well, I'm just curious. Are you a dick in real life, or is that just
Just to
in
you.
the draft? Okay.
Just to you and
Just checking.
my manager at work.
I got you.
I hate that.
Well,
son
at
of a
least we
bitch.
kept the draft tradition of me getting hit in the nuts once.
It wasn't that
for
one.
draft.
That one wasn't that good. I get you
Anyways,
a lot better coming
All right.
baseball season.
Well, we're kind of blabbering
Wrap it
on
up.
here, so I'll go ahead and end this recording, and we'll have it posted. Hopefully, everybody gives it a listen, gives it a like, and responds to it.
gives
Let's
it a
know your.
like. Is it going on Facebook?